Empire. Can AI change the betting game?
It's not just a predictive tool when it comes to games. There's also, predictive tools when it comes to individual player performances. And I'm thinking there, oh my God, like I could have used this. This would have helped me in my fantasy leagues. I would have been using this as a host.
That's Mike Yam, anchor reporter at NFL Network, who is also the founder of Pine Sports, which is using machine learning to help bettors get a true edge. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein. Mike Yam has been a professional broadcaster for NBA TV, ESPN, Pac-12 Network, and now the NFL Network. And let me just say, as someone who shared an anchor desk with him in the past, genuinely one of my favorite people in the business. So it was my pleasure to learn more about his not-so-side hustle that looks to find a niche in the exploding gambling marketplace, enlisting the help of his longtime friend, Vijay Dewan, to create Pine Sports. Our guests this week are Mike Yam, who you can see on the NFL Network as a host and an anchor, and Vijay Dewan. They are co-founders of a startup called Pine Sports, which is an AI platform that is going to modernize the betting experience for all sports bettors. Hey guys, how are you?
Doing great, Bram. Great to hear your voice. And I think Vijay and I are super excited not only to be with you, but just kind of talk about Pine and the platform.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let me just pull the curtain up. Mike and I used to work together at ESPN as anchors. So we've known each other for a very long time. And both of us have found not only experience on air, but in this realm as an entrepreneur. So, Mike, let me just start there with you because you are still a working broadcaster. What kind of led you down this path to do this? I don't know if on the side is the right way to put it, but why did you go this direction?
Not say on the side. Vijay and I probably talk to each other more than we talk to our family at this point on a daily basis. It feels like you can kind of be in the thick of things. But, to be honest with you, this is, and I give Vijay completely full credit for this. We were friends from high school. Vijay is a brilliant guy. I would say probably smarter now than he was in high school because he was hanging out with me. But he had reached out to me at the start of COVID and with this idea. And Vijay, I'll let you actually kind of tell the story a little bit more. But Vijay built the entire platform. And to me, it was kind of the brains behind the operation and, brought me on to kind of help with, context and some of the business development side of things. And, we've been kind of tag teaming a lot of the different aspects of the business. But the brainchild for all of this came from Vijay. And I think he knew a little bit more of my fantasy background and how I sort of started in the business. And when he told me and had asked me, he's like, hey, is anyone doing this? I was like, man, I actually don't think anyone is. And that's kind of when the ball started to get rolling, Vijay.
Yeah, during COVID, I got really into programming. I was a computer science major in undergrad, got back into it because I had some free time on my hands and just saw all this incredible stuff that was happening in the AI space. Started kind of looking at COVID data first, but as COVID progressed, I'm a big sports fan. I, before COVID, had my buddies over for poker. We'd all watch the game. We're in New Jersey, so we bet on DraftKings and FanDuel. So I started talking to my friends and said, "Hey, would you guys want to build your own AI models?" And they were excited about it. So I started building this for friends. I reached out to Mike about it too, and just I know Mike knows the space so well. I said, "Is there anything out there where people can just build their own models to bet on games, to make predictions about player props, things like that?" And there really wasn't. So we thought this would be a fun thing to build. It was really made for us and our friends. It's been a great ride so far.
So take me through the tech a little bit, Vijay. When you started this process of building models for sports betting, where did it start and where did it lead you?
Sure. So the really cool thing about AI is you just tell it the stats that you think are important and what you want it to predict, and it'll just iterate over all the games that you give it. So we have 5 years of sports data on Pine. So it'll look at every game over the last 5 years, and you could say for football, you think, yards per play, completion percentage, things like that are important, penalty yards. you give the model that, and you let it run through 5 years of games, it'll calibrate the model as well as it possibly can. And then you can give it, next week's games, and it'll make a prediction, give you a confidence level on who it thinks will win based on the stats that you gave it.
And Mike, how did you get into wanting to be part of this idea?
Well, Vijay, it started out where Vijay just said, hey, I just wanted to kind of throw some things off of you. And obviously, the two of us being friends, of course, I was just going to say yes. And Bram, you and I go back, we kind of have that sort of same mentality where if someone reaches out, we're going to hit them back. But I think as we got more involved in the weeds and I realized what was there and Vijay said, hey, I need a little bit more help. It was, quite honestly, a really easy yes. I hadn't seen anything like this before. Bram, I had started, before you and I were together at ESPN, my first real TV job was at NBA TV, and it came in the fantasy space. And I was doing stuff on radio and all of those types of things. When Vijay showed me some of the projection tools, that would have been gold. Bram, when I was at NBA TV, I would have like a game log up and I would write down, you'd look for trends, right? You'd look for the, what has this guy done in the last 5 games, 10 games? What are those numbers? Is he trending in the right direction? And then BJ showed me, because it's not just a predictive tool when it comes to games. There's also, predictive tools when it comes to individual player performances. And I'm thinking there, oh my God, I could have used this. This would have helped me in my fantasy leagues. I would have been using this as a host. And I had the calculator next to me. This is how old I am. I had the calculator next to me and I was crunching some of those numbers. I had a notepad and would look for some of those trends. And what VJ has been able to build is a platform that allows you to, pick a set of games, 5 games, 10 games, a full season back and see what a player has done and get a prediction. And I think what's really cool about this, Bram, is because it's not just a sorting tool, which is what I'm describing, but you and I both know, hey, sometimes an individual performance is more meaningful depending on who that opponent is.
Yeah.
And if it's a great defense balls out against, you go, oh, okay, I would eyeball those types of things. Well, we have a normalized average that takes into consideration some of those defenses. So you just feel better about that projection and what a guy can actually go and do. So to me, there was all these elements, and I looked at it from like a content perspective and how do you build some things? And look, the thing that we haven't even mentioned, Bram, is this idea of like the third vertical. We have, the projections when it comes to fantasy and props and then the predictive tools, but also this content thing where we're having a lot of our users take the insights that they're getting from the tools themselves, and then they're creating content around it. And for me, as sort of, and Bram, I know for you and BJ is super excited about this. Like it was really cool to see this community kind of come together and create content just based off of the tools. Okay,
so this is what I wanted to ask you when you showed me this. There are many different ways that you could utilize this, and it sounds like the direction you want to go is content vertical. This easily could be something that partners with a betting outlet and could be something that could encourage more betting with better information. As you think through what Pine Sports is going to be, have you determined what it is at this point?
It's a great question, Bram. The more, and I could see Vijay smiling when we're on this Zoom because, I think when we initially put, sort of a lot of these ideas, and a lot of it's on the fly, right? Like you kind of have to adjust depending on the avenues that you go on. But as we had some of these conversations with a lot of media companies, with some of the sports books as well, it became a little, I shouldn't say really obvious, but Vijay and I want to speak and kind of get your take on this too. But we thought it was B2C, and in a lot of ways we still are, just because we have the users that want to create this content. You can become an expert. There's one company that we talked to that's got a portfolio of companies where they're basically crowdsourcing, right? And it's overseas. It's not happening necessarily in the States, although I know there's sites like this in the US where they're crowdsourcing some of these ideas. And yet, Bram, it's sort of shooting from the hip, right? Like they don't have artificial intelligence machine learning tools that can really help them out. And so like there's that missing piece, this validation piece for what some of this content is. And, for us, so like there's still that play, but I think a lot of the companies that we've talked to, you have the conversations with them, you show them the demo, and then, I follow up on the back end. I was like, hey, have you seen anything like this? And the answer is always no. Hey, haven't seen customized tools like this. People talk about that, but we haven't seen anyone do it to this level, and no one's using AI and machine learning. So there's all these pieces that are here. And I think a lot of these conversations, Bram, they circle back to, hey, is there a licensing play? Hey, would you guys consider giving us, the ability to use some of these tools, white label some of these tools, just because we don't have anything like this. So that's a long-winded answer to say, yes, B2C, yes, B2B.
Yes. Vijay, what do you think at this point? Where do you see this going?
Yeah, no, I agree with Michael. I think what the original vision, and I think this is sort of where we are now, is, we wanted to give people these really, really powerful tools. And then I think what makes, us as humans like so interesting and smart is that we, through crowdsourcing, we kind of share knowledge and get smarter together. So that was kind of the goal with the stories vertical. And I'll just give an example from last basketball season. When Jamal Murray was injured, Michael Porter Jr. just took on this amazing offensive role. But the books didn't catch up to it. And somebody on Pine found it, wrote a story about it, and people were riding Michael Porter Jr.'s 3-point props, the over for it, for months. The books caught up to that. What they didn't realize was he wasn't under the boards and he wasn't getting rebounds. So they rode the under for his rebounds for the rest of the season. And I think they hit, as a group, 23 out of 25 props at the end of the season. You see people picking up on these little trends over and over again. So that sort of B2C model, we're giving tools to just regular users to mess around and then share their insights and put it in stories and talk about it. That's incredibly cool. But now, we've spent a lot of time speaking with our customers. And what we've seen is, they feel more confident betting. They're betting more. They're betting on sports they might have not otherwise have bet on, because I think these tools give them the confidence to make smart bets. So from that perspective, I can see partnerships with sports books who want, people to feel more confident in their bets, and who want people to place more bets. And as Mike said, I can see partnerships with other analytics type companies that are looking to give people more information and get their users and customers the best tools possible.
Do you think it's possible that a odds-making organization will want to acquire you? And do you know if what you're doing is comparable to what they're using to set lines in the first place?
We have had some interesting conversations. I don't want to speak for other companies. I would hope they would. I would hope they would want their users to be smarter and more informed. I think lines, there are likely most books don't set their own lines. Most books either take lines from what are called sharp books, which are oftentimes offshore books, or maybe Circa here. Those books are likely using the types of tools we have, plus the sort of qualitative human element where you have an expert in that particular sport looking over the models and making sure they're not missing anything like an injured player or weather that favors a certain team that the model might not be picking up on. Most of the other books are copying those sharp books. So I think what we're doing is taking the tools that the sharp books have and putting it in the user's hands. And letting users play around with it, which is really fun. And I would hope that all books would want their users to be more informed, so that they're placing more bets, and the books themselves will sharpen up too, and will just be a much better space and a smarter space.
And Bram, I think intuitively you might say, well, why would the book want their users to be smarter and more informed? I think Vijay kind of touched on it on the end there, where they're staying in that ecos first, right? And there's more transparency. It's funny, we had one conversation with a group, and they had mentioned that a lot of the feedback that they're getting, and it's a large place, that they're getting from their users is, hey, we want more transparency in the space. And look, what Pine has been able to give its users is, we're making you feel smarter because you're more informed, and you have those tools that BJ made reference to that don't exist on another platform. Bram, it's very different. The conversations, while they're similar, they are different with a lot of the media companies that we're talking to. They'll sit there and say, oh, okay, cool. Like how many minutes is a user sitting on your site? Well, it's actually over 5 minutes. And had before Vijay and I got into this project, you would have said, hey, 5 minutes on site, is that a long time? I would have said, no, actually not a lot. And then you go and you do the research, you go, oh my God, like we're smashing some of the other major sites and like what they're doing. So it's like, oh, they're there. How many pro projections? How many fantasy projections? I mean, it is month over month, from December to January. I don't have necessarily the February numbers in front of me, but it was 58% increases in our projection tool. We got over 15, or squaring in on 16,000 predictive models that have been made. So the beta group, and now the site is open, but the beta group, along with some of the new users that are on the platform, they've shown like, oh, okay, like now the process has been validated. You're not spending 5 minutes on the site to just, you set your browser and then you just walked away. I mean, that's not what's happening here. So to me, that's a really cool thing. And once again, the media companies, they're intrigued by that. And I think, some of the other companies are as well, but it's varying. And I think the fact that Pine is checking both of those boxes makes it really unique.
Mike, let me stay on the content part of it for a moment. As we're taping this, the Super Bowl happened yesterday. There was not that I noticed, any specific mention of sports gambling. And I think the operative word here is yet. As you kind of survey the marketplace with gambling and whether it becomes ubiquitous on sports television or whether it remains kind of its own separate entity, where do you see gambling falling into sports broadcasting?
Bram, I think, and I don't want to speak for you. You and I have been in this business for a long time. It would be insanity if this thing, I'm not a betting man, but if I was, I would tell you it'd be crazy not to bet for this thing to become more and more mainstream. And I know you made a reference to it. It wasn't talked about and discussed during the Super Bowl. So obviously, the different books having their commercials, seeing, NFL Hall of Famers like Jerry Rice pouring Gatorade on folks, like that exists and it's not going anywhere. And I think what's really interesting is, Vijay and I grew up in northern New Jersey. So we've seen sort of what that state has been able to do, New York, and the tax revenue that they're now pulling in. I think it's just a matter of time where it becomes so mainstream. Every single network on the sports side is talking about it. They have programming around it. They're taking the dollars from an advertising standpoint around it. So to me, all arrows are pointing in this direction. And when we were growing up, Bram and Vijay, like this was something that no one discussed. It was like the seedy game, behind the scenes that wasn't supposed to happen. But yet it was happening. And now it's become more popular. It's become legal in many states. And, the amount of dollars that are being poured into these markets, it's tremendous. I mean, the user acquisition costs that people and companies are spending are just astronomical. And I think we've seen it on the fantasy side. I mean, like I said, that was my first job in television, was on the fantasy side. And how big that business is, to me, I think it can run right with it, if not bigger.
I just want to
go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to quickly add to that. Yeah, I think what sports companies and what leagues saw with fantasy is that, I think before fantasy became popular, Mike and I are Giants fans, we're Knicks fans. We'd watch our team. If our team was getting blown out, maybe we'd turn the game off. With fantasy, you saw people interested in teams across the board, whether they were fans of that team or not. And I think with betting, what you see is that sort of what fantasy did, but it's on steroids, because you can bet on a particular game, you can bet on a single player. So even if there's a blowout, that player might still be close to hitting a prop, and you'll watch the game. So I think this is benefits the league. Viewership will go up, and I think you see the books. There are tons of books out there that are looking for content, and the media companies are now filling that content void with really interesting content around betting. So, I think it's here to stay, because there's just, for everyone, it's a win-win. And as Mike said, the states are getting a ton of revenue and people are having fun.
Okay, last thing, Mike. So talk to me about the user experience with the site, what you thought through, there's a mountain of information here, obviously, that people are going to need to be able to get through. The goal here sounds like you want a social aspect to go along with betting as well. So can you talk me through how you guys thought through user and the ability to use it easily?
Yeah, the UI experience, Vijay and I we continue to iterate. I mean, this was it has changed multiple times over time. Vijay's been in the weeds on the design and that experience. And I think we sort of lived in this world where we want to make it as simple as possible. And, if you think about, a sports analogy, right? Like if I had asked you, hey, Bram, what's the next pitch? Is it a fastball or a curve? You might hedge a little bit. There's that added moment of having to think where if I said to you, hey, is it fastball or strike? Or excuse me, is it strike or ball? That's an easier question to go and answer. And I think a lot of times when we build out this platform, we ask ourselves that question. So, it's as simple as hitting the Explore tab on the site and BJ, at that point you have the ability to go and create some of those prop projections or fantasy projections, do stat comparisons, and on the Predict tab to do that custom modeling and to have your own artificial intelligence dashboard, which sounds way more complicated. It is, in terms of the build out process and what it actually means. But for the user, what are the stats that you think decide a game? If you are a sports fan and you've been watching it your entire life, you get to have complete control over what you think decides the game. It's simple as a drop-down menu. You pick those stats. You basically hit analyze and project. And at that point, the artificial intelligence does everything else. And it is as simple as that. And then if you want to take some of those interactive charts and embed them into a stories page, it's very, very simple. It's within, a couple clicks. You can save it. You can even share those on social media as well.
The last thing for you, Vijay. In-game betting and speed of which the information is processed. How have you guys thought through getting that information to sports bettors?
Yeah, I think in-game betting is something that people really, really love. So right now, our data isn't in real time, but that's, I think, top of our list of things to do because it's really fun. You're watching the game. You want to. You're looking at a player, you want to see who's going to score next or who's going to get the next touchdown, who's, whether somebody's going to get a certain amount of points in a particular quarter. That sort of stuff's really interesting. And I think for Pine, that is the next step. That is top of list for us. And it's about getting really fast data in everyone's hands. And again, what Mike said is taking what's really complicated and simplifying it so that anybody can use it. And just to, other tools out there, I think take really simple stuff and dress it up and make it sound complicated. Our goal is to take really complicated and really just cutting edge technology and simplify and cut it down and simplify and make it easy for you so you guys can make really informed decisions. So we've done it, I think, with sort of the pregame betting, and we're still working to make that better. And the next big thing for us is in-game betting and thinking about ways to give you cutting-edge insights in the middle of a game so that you can optimize that in-game betting too.
Mike Yam and Vijay Dewan are the co-founders of Pine Sports. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, Bram.
On the next Future Sport podcast, if you streamed the Super Bowl, you better have left Twitter off.
And unfortunately, for the fourth year in a row, nothing's changed. Everybody is still in the 40, 50-second range for delay behind the field of play, which is just, in our mind, it's unacceptable. It's not tolerable. And what's interesting is for the first time, we're now starting to see fans agree and go to social media and, in droves, in hundreds are complaining about the delays in the stream and the buffering. And
that's Jed Korenthal, Chief Marketing Officer at Phoenix, who returns to the show to continue to preach to the streaming gospel that there is no good reason for those streams to be so far behind the traditional broadcast. That will do it for this episode. As always, the future is now. This is the Future Sport Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein.